Hi, 7th grade. This is Ms. Dohan here to talk to you today about marking our evidence. So we're going to be talking about two things, how to mark the details as well as how to format the citations. For marking the details, it's going to depend on whether or not the detail has, it does include dialogue or there's no dialogue in the detail that you chose. The second thing that we're going to be talking about is formatting citations, and we're going to talk about the differences between the first citation in your essay and then all the remaining citations in your essay because they're all from the same source. In other words, they're all from Edward Bloor's novel Tangerine. So this video will help you get ready for editing in your work. First, this applies to details that do not include dialogue. So in other words, there's no speaking in this detail whatsoever. The steps to mark details with no dialogue: first, you want to insert your quotation marks. This is pretty standard. The second thing that you want to do is copy the detail exactly as it appears in the text. So that means if it's in italics, include italics. If there's spelling error, include the spelling error. Basically, however it appears in the text, that's how you want it to look in your essay. This one's really important because people sometimes still get tricked up on this. So look at the very end of your detail. If the detail ends in either a question mark or an exclamation point, then you do include this at the very end of your detail. So in other words, you include it before the final quotation mark. If the detail ends in either a period or a comma, then you do not include this. Okay? So in other words, look at this kind of this color coding system. If it's in green, so quotation mark and exclamation point, put it in. If period or comma at the very end, then do not include it. Again, after you're totally done with that piece of explicit evidence, put your quotation marks, and you're almost good to go. So here's an example listed for you that really has nothing to do with our essay, but I just wanted to give you a kind of sample. It says, when Paul first gets to his new home in Florida, he is nervous about how he will fit in, especially on the soccer team. Paul wonders, and here's where I have my detail. Notice that there's no speaking whatsoever, so there's no person speaking. That's why we only have the quotations at the beginning, the quotations at the end. Mine does have a question mark at the very end, so I include that punctuation. But remember that there's going to be a period after the citation. So that's why we don't include commas or periods if they appear in this spot. Okay? Moving on to marking details that do have dialogue. So in other words, there are people speaking. There's either one or more persons speaking in your detail. So the steps are as follows. It starts the same way. First, you have to insert your quotation marks. Then you need to look at your detail. And whenever that dialogue starts, you add a single quotation mark. In other words, an apostrophe. So if your detail starts right away with dialogue, then your direct quote is going to look like this. First I have the double quotations, then I have the single quotation, then I have the dialogue. Hey, let's pretend that's the dialogue. I'm going to copy the detail, again, exactly as it appears in the text. Then this depends on when, again, I'm done with, or my dialogue ends in the detail. So I'm going to add another single quotation or an apostrophe when the dialogue is done. So let's say, kind of going back to my example, it says, hey, like, what's up, dude, is the whole dialogue. It says question mark, then the dialogue is done. My quote might continue on, and it might say like, asked Joey. And so then I would continue on, and I would follow kind of my same format for marking details without dialogue. So if this is all I wanted, then I would have my ending quotation marks. Okay. The same rule for ending punctuation applies. If the detail ends in either a question mark or an exclamation point, then do include it. If the detail ends in either a period or a comma, do not include it. And when you're totally done with your direct quote, with your explicit evidence, include that double quotation. Double quotation. So again, here's another example. Again, it has nothing to do with the essay, or our topic of our essay. It says, Mr. and Mrs. Fisher even realize that Paul and his brother Eric do not get along. When Mr. Fisher is telling Paul about his new room and their new house, he says, and so this is the very start of my quote, so there's the double, and then I have dialogue right away, so there's another single piece right there. Here's all dialogue. This is all Mr. Fisher talking, and that's it. That's all I decided to include. So I have one single apostrophe where the dialogue ends, and then I have the double quotation, which, sorry, you can't really see that, after, to show I'm totally done with my detail. So I hope that's helped you marking your details with dialogue. The next thing we're going to talk about is ending citations. So this is super, super important because you need to give credit to the author. Whenever you have a direct quote from any source, you always need to have a citation. And the steps are pretty simple. So follow these steps. And I should have had that covered, but oh well. Step 1, after your final quotation mark, space over. Not right next to, just one space. Then insert the parentheses. Next, insert the necessary info, and we'll talk about that in a second. Finally, after that, include the parentheses. And the last thing that you need is you need to insert the period. And this is where people get tricked up. They might have the parentheses with the information, but not have the period after. The period goes after the parentheses. Okay, so for this essay, all of your direct quotes came from the exact same source. In other words, they came from Tangerine. So in this case, your first citation is going to look different than all of your others because that's where you're giving all of the information that you need. Your first citation is going to include both of the following pieces of information in the parentheses. So first, it's going to include the author's last name, and it's the last name only. So in other words, it's Bloor. The second thing that it's going to include is, well, you're going to have the author's last name and then a comma, and then you're going to have the page number. So your first citation will look something like this, Bloor, comma, to 12. Okay, then goes the period. So this is what your first paragraph, first detail should look like. Probably not the page number though. All of your remaining citations will be the same and look different than this one. They will all be the same because the only thing that they will be including is the page number in the parentheses. That's it. So, really quick, some final tips for marking quotations and citing. Use a partner to check the accuracy of your details. Make sure it appears exactly as it is in the text. Partners are really helpful for that. Remember, at the very end of the quote, if it ends in either a period or a comma, do not include, but put the period after the parentheses. That period has to go after the parentheses no matter what. And finally, only include the page number in the parentheses. So after the author's last name or in any other citation, there's no extra words. Like, do not include page or PG or even P. I hope this helped you with citations and marking quotations, and good luck on applying this to your essay.